Have you ever looked at a leader and wondered, how did they get there? It's a haunting question because we've all asked it. Watching someone clearly unqualified ascend to power, while wiser, more capable voices are ignored, feels like a glitch in the system. But what if it's not a glitch? What if it's the system working as designed? History is littered with emperors who burned their kingdoms to the ground and CEOs who built empires on lies. Yet somehow they rose, and often they stayed. It's not coincidence. It's a pattern. This paradox that the most foolish often end up in power isn't just an oddity. It's a mirror. It reflects something deeply flawed, not just in our institutions, but in us. In the way we perceive confidence as competence, in our craving for certainty over truth, in the blind trust we offer to those who shout the loudest and question the least. And the cost? It's not just poor decisions, it's lost potential. It's the silencing of those who think deeply, speak carefully, and see the world for what it truly is: complex, uncertain, and fragile. Niccolo Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He dared to say what others feared. That power rarely goes to the most virtuous or intelligent, but to those who know how to appear that way. Today, that insight is more relevant than ever. Before we fix the problem, we must understand the game. And to understand the game, we have to start with one uncomfortable truth. Power doesn't always reward wisdom. It rewards performance. Niccolo Machiavelli didn't write for idealists. He didn't waste ink describing how the world should work. He wrote for those bold enough to see how it actually works. And at the core of his philosophy lies a brutal, enduring truth. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. With this one sentence, he shattered centuries of political naivety. He revealed a game that few admit they're playing, where perception always outranks reality, and power belongs not to the most capable, but to the most convincing. Machiavelli understood something most people still deny. We don't live in a meritocracy. We live in a world of performance, where optics dominate truth and style eclipses substance. Leaders rise not by proving their competence, but by managing how others perceive it. This idea might be uncomfortable, even cynical, but it's not wrong. Look around. In every arena, politics, business, media, the winners are rarely the wisest. They are the ones who know how to control the narrative, the ones who speak in absolutes, the ones who never show doubt even when they're deeply wrong. The truth, Machiavelli suggested, is irrelevant if you can appear right. And that's where power is won and lost. A truly intelligent, ethical person might hesitate, question, consider every angle. But in a world hungry for certainty, that nuance is mistaken for weakness. Meanwhile, someone with no real answers, but great performance skills, appears confident, decisive, and strong. And perception is power. This is the tragedy of visibility. People judge leaders based on surface impressions, how they dress, how they speak, how they make others feel. Not on depth, wisdom, or truth. Machiavelli wasn't applauding this, he was warning us. And yet, centuries later, we still fall for the mask. We still confuse charisma with competence. If you want to understand why so many fools end up in charge, start here, with Machiavelli's ruthless insight into human nature. We are drawn to illusion. And unless we learn to see past the surface, we will continue to empower those who know how to look like leaders, even when they are anything but. What if the very qualities that make a person intelligent are the same ones that keep them from ever holding power? It's a haunting contradiction, one that Niccolo Machiavelli understood centuries ago, and one that still traps some of the most gifted minds today. Because when it comes to rising through the ranks of power, intelligence is not always an asset. In fact, in many environments, it's a silent liability. Genuinely intelligent individuals tend to be cautious, reflective, self-aware. They see complexity where others see simplicity. They hesitate where others rush. They ask questions where others declare certainties. And in a world that rewards boldness over balance, that hesitation is mistaken for weakness. The leader who pauses to think, who considers trade-offs, who says, "I'm not sure," is too easily drowned out by the louder, simpler voices that promise everything and doubt nothing. Look at history. Socrates, one of the greatest thinkers of all time, was sentenced to death by the very democracy he tried to enlighten. His humility, I know that I know nothing made him a philosophical giant, but a political failure. Meanwhile, populist leaders have risen by offering absolute answers to impossibly complex problems, exploiting people's fear of uncertainty with seductive clarity. In competitive environments, intelligence often brings with it ethical considerations, nuanced thinking, and a deep understanding of limitations. But these traits don't play well in arenas where winning means projecting strength, decisiveness, and confidence, regardless of truth. Intelligence sees shades of gray, power demands black and white, and so the thinker is outpaced by the performer. The irony is devastating. Those who could guide society with wisdom and integrity are pushed aside because their very honesty, their very depth, makes them difficult to follow. Intelligence whispers where power demands a roar, and those whispers are often drowned in a sea of certainty and spectacle. So the next time you wonder why the thoughtful are sidelined while the arrogant take center stage, remember this: the game of power does not reward introspection. It rewards projection. And intelligence, unless wielded with strategy, becomes a silent burden, respected from afar, but rarely trusted to lead. Have you ever noticed how the least competent person in the room is often the most confident? How those with the fewest qualifications speak with the most certainty, while those who truly understand the complexity of an issue remain quiet, cautious, even self-doubting? This isn't just frustrating, it's a profound psychological bias. Known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, it describes how people with limited knowledge tend to overestimate their abilities, while the truly knowledgeable underestimate theirs. And it plays a powerful, often invisible role in why the foolish so often rise. This effect isn't just a quirk of personality, it's embedded in our brains. Those who know little don't know enough to recognize their own ignorance. Meanwhile, those who know more are painfully aware of all they don't know. The result is a confidence gap. The loudest voices are often the least qualified, and the quietest, the ones we should be listening to, are overlooked. Machiavelli would have recognized this pattern immediately. He understood that perception creates power, and power rewards the illusion of certainty. In modern leadership studies, this truth keeps repeating. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that individuals who were overconfident were more likely to be seen as leaders, regardless of actual skill or competence. Confidence, not competence, became the ticket to influence, and the consequences are everywhere. From failed military leaders like General Custer to overhyped tech entrepreneurs like Elizabeth Holmes or Adam Newman, we see a world where confident voices drown out caution and bold promises defeat quiet truth. It's not that these individuals are skilled, it's that they sound like they are. And in a society addicted to performance, sounding right is often more valuable than being right. But here's the tragedy. When people follow confidence over competence, they're not just misled, they're betrayed, because the illusion of certainty is a false comfort. And when it fails catastrophically. The challenge for all of us is to resist this trap, to look past volume and charisma, to seek wisdom in the quiet, in the thoughtful, in the hesitant. Because more often than not, the ones who hesitate to lead are the only ones truly fit to. Confidence is magnetic. It pulls people in, silences doubt, and cloaks uncertainty with the illusion of strength. And in the hands of a manipulative leader, it becomes a weapon. Overconfidence isn't just a personality trait, it's a strategy, and those who wield it well can rise to power, even when they have no substance behind the curtain. Studies show that people are naturally drawn to those who speak with certainty. We equate confidence with competence, decisiveness with intelligence, and vision with truth. But in reality, these traits are often performed, not possessed. A 2020 study found that overconfident individuals were consistently perceived as stronger leaders, regardless of their actual abilities. The substance didn't matter. The show did. This illusion is everywhere, from boardrooms to political arenas. Look at the tech world. Entrepreneurs like Adam Newman of WeWork raise billions, not on solid business fundamentals, but on pure charisma and bold, unwavering vision. Or consider political figures who offer sweeping promises and speak in absolutes, effortlessly bypassing the nuance that real solutions require. It's not their plans that gain support, it's their delivery. It's the confidence. This is the great danger. Overconfidence disarms critical thinking. It short-circuits skepticism. And when it meets a vulnerable, uncertain public craving direction, it creates a perfect storm where performance replaces substance and power falls into the hands of the wrong people. Machiavelli would not be surprised. He understood long ago that people don't follow leaders because they're right. They follow them because they believe they're right, and nothing fuels belief like confidence, even if it's empty, even if it's dangerous. In the game of power, confidence is not just a tool, it's the mask that lets manipulation walk in the front door, dressed as leadership. If you think incompetent leaders simply stumble into power and fall just as quickly, think again. In reality, many of them stay, not because they are strong, but because they have mastered the art of protecting weakness. And Machiavelli, centuries ago, described exactly how they do it. He warned, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Weak leaders, he noticed, rarely surround themselves with talent. Instead, they build a fortress of loyalty, flattery, and mediocrity to shield themselves from challenge. This tactic is both psychological and strategic. Insecure leaders feel threatened by competence. They fear being exposed, outshined, or replaced. So rather than recruit the best, they select the safest, the most obedient, the least threatening, the ones who will never question the throne. This creates a ripple effect, a hierarchy of weakness, where every level is more concerned with loyalty than merit. Competence becomes the enemy, and soon the entire structure, whether a corporation, a political party, or a government, is infected. History is full of examples. From Roman emperors who replaced capable administrators with entertainers and sycophants, to modern regimes where loyalty to the leader outweighs qualifications, we see a clear pattern. Mediocrity becomes institutionalized. Once this system takes root, it becomes nearly self-sustaining. Incompetent leaders appoint weaker successors. Constructive criticism is silenced. Dissent is punished, and the organization becomes an echo chamber where truth has no place. The tragedy? Talented people either leave, burn out, or are forced into silence. And the public, the customers, or the citizens suffer the consequences. Machiavelli didn't just describe this dynamic, he diagnosed it. He knew that weak rulers protect themselves not by becoming stronger, but by ensuring no one around them ever dares to be. So if you've ever worked somewhere where asking questions made you a problem, where speaking up was labeled disloyal, you've witnessed this sickness firsthand. It's not incompetence by accident, it's incompetence by design. Why do we keep choosing leaders who lie with confidence over those who speak hard truths with humility? Why do simple answers, even the wrong ones, win over complex realities that demand patience and thought? The answer lies not in logic, but in psychology. Human beings are wired to crave certainty, especially in times of fear, confusion, or instability. And Machiavelli saw it long before science gave it a name. In The Prince, he wrote, "The great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances as though they were realities." It's a devastating insight into our deepest vulnerability. We'd often rather feel safe than be right. Real expertise comes with nuance, caveats, conditions, complexity. It speaks in terms of probabilities, trade-offs, and uncomfortable truths. But in an uncertain world, those answers feel cold, distant, unsatisfying. So we reach for what feels certain. We trust the voice that says, "I alone can fix this," even when part of us knows the problem has no easy fix. Modern psychology confirms this. When people feel threatened, they seek cognitive closure, a mental shortcut that favors definitive answers over ambiguity. The more anxious we are, the more appealing it becomes to follow someone who speaks with absolute confidence, even if they're wrong. That's why climate scientists with years of data and nuance are often ignored, while loud political commentators with no expertise command millions of followers. It's not about who's right, it's about who offers emotional relief. Machiavelli didn't condemn this, he exposed it. He understood that perception is everything. In politics, in media, in power, the truth often loses to what feels true. And as long as our minds are wired to prefer comfort over complexity, leaders who simplify, exaggerate, and distort will always have an edge. The cost of this psychological vulnerability? a society that prizes easy answers over honest ones, and a public that continually rewards those who tell us what we want to hear rather than what we need to know. Until we learn to sit with discomfort and resist the seduction of simplicity, the cycle will continue, one false certainty at a time. There's a hidden burden carried by the truly intelligent: conscience. It's what separates them from the ruthless. But in the brutal world of power, this moral compass is often less a gift than a liability. Machiavelli didn't romanticize intelligence. He recognized its tragic weakness. Those who see the world with greater clarity also tend to feel the weight of their actions more deeply. They hesitate before deceiving. They flinch at betrayal. They calculate not only the consequences of strategy, but the cost to their soul. And in a world that rewards raw dominance, this self-awareness can be fatal. Machiavelli famously wrote, "It is necessary for a prince who wishes to maintain his position to learn how not to be good." These words weren't an endorsement of evil, but a harsh reminder that morality and power often sit at odds. While intelligent people are guided by ethical reasoning and long-term thinking, the manipulator is freed by their lack of restraint. Where one sees lines not to be crossed, the other sees opportunities. Where one considers truth, the other weaponizes lies. Look at history. Cicero, brilliant, eloquent, principled, was defeated by Julius Caesar, who shattered every norm to gain control. In today's world, we watch qualified ethical leaders struggle in elections against those who deceive boldly and strike without hesitation. In organizations, those who question decisions out of integrity are often labeled difficult, while those who conform and manipulate climb faster. This is what game theorists call a race to the bottom. When unethical tactics go unpunished, they become contagious, and slowly the rules of the game change. Deception becomes strategy, betrayal becomes normal, morality becomes weakness. The intelligent may win the argument, but the ruthless win the throne. Unless systems are designed to protect ethics, the honest will always be outmaneuvered by the shameless. Machiavelli's brilliance was in showing us this tension, not to make us cynical, but to wake us up. Because if we want morality to survive in leadership, it must be guarded. It must be built into the structure. Otherwise, the brave will fall and the cunning will rule. Incompetence doesn't rise in a vacuum. It thrives or dies, depending on the structures we build around it. Machiavelli understood that the behavior of leaders is not just about personal ambition, but about the environment that either rewards deception or demands integrity. And today that truth is more relevant than ever. In systems with clear, immediate feedback, where success and failure are measurable and visible, incompetence is hard to hide. Think of a surgeon whose patients don't survive, an engineer whose bridges collapse. In these professions, results speak louder than charisma. Reality forces accountability. But in many sectors, especially politics, business, and media, feedback is delayed, distorted, or deflected. A failed decision can be blamed on predecessors. A financial scandal can be buried in accounting jargon. A lie can be spun into a narrative. And in these murky waters, incompetence survives, and often it ascends. Institutional design matters. Systems with centralized power and weak oversight become breeding grounds for corruption and mediocrity. The Soviet Union collapsed under the weight of top-heavy decision-making that lacked transparency and checks. By contrast, Germany's dual-board corporate governance model, with separate bodies for management and oversight, serves as a buffer against unqualified leadership. It's not just about who holds power, it's about how that power is structured and reviewed. Information asymmetry plays a role too. When success is hard to measure, like in media influence, political leadership, or corporate branding, style overtakes substance. We judge leaders not on their outcomes, but on how they appear on camera, how they feel. Machiavelli predicted this. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. Finally, economic incentives shape leadership behavior. When systems reward short-term wins over long-term stability, like in Wall Street bonus culture or quarterly-driven corporate strategy, leaders learn to prioritize optics over outcomes. The 2008 financial crisis wasn't just caused by greed, it was fueled by a system that rewarded temporary illusion over sustainable value. So if we want to elevate competence, we have to design for it. We must create systems that punish deception and reward truth. Environments where results matter more than charisma and where substance outlives spectacle. Otherwise, we will continue to watch the unqualified rise because the system quietly favors their survival. Incompetent leaders don't remain in power by accident. They survive and often thrive because they exploit the human mind. Machiavelli may not have known modern psychology, but his observations foretold exactly how weak rulers manipulate perception, silence dissent, and maintain dominance through strategic illusion. Today, backed by cognitive science, we can finally understand the psychological playbook they use to secure their position, not with competence, but with control. The first tactic is tribalism. Weak leaders manufacture identity-based loyalty by creating sharp divisions between us and them. By linking their personal identity to that of a group, nation, party, culture, they transform criticism into an existential threat. Any attack on them becomes an attack on the group itself. This is known as identity fusion, and it's devastatingly effective. When followers feel that defending the leader is the same as defending themselves, truth becomes irrelevant. Loyalty becomes survival. Second, they flood the environment with chaos and cognitive overload. Through constant controversies, dramatic distractions, and shifting narratives, they overwhelm our ability to think clearly. The brain, fatigued and overstimulated, seeks mental shortcuts, and that's when manipulation works best. When we're too exhausted to question, too distracted to analyze, falsehood slips through the cracks unchallenged. Third, they employ Orwellian doublethink, the ability to hold contradictory positions and shift narratives so frequently that truth becomes a moving target. This creates confusion and resignation. People stop trying to hold them accountable because the ground is always shifting. The leader says and does anything, rewrites history, and relies on the crowd's short memory. As Machiavelli noted, the vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances. And in a world of rapid media, appearances are easy to manipulate. Fourth, they exploit economic insecurity. When people are afraid of poverty, unemployment, instability, they become more susceptible to simplistic solutions. Incompetent leaders exploit this vulnerability, offering easy scapegoats and false promises that target emotion, not logic. Fear narrows perception, and a fearful public becomes easier to control. Together, these tactics create a psychological fortress. The incompetent leader doesn't win through wisdom. They win by weaponizing emotions, especially fear, anger, and loyalty. And worst of all, their tactics work because they hijack our cognitive defaults, our desire for certainty, for belonging, for simplicity in a world that feels overwhelmingly complex. So the next time a leader rises who divides, distracts, and dominates through confusion, remember, incompetence does not mean harmless. It often means dangerous because it hides behind the mask of performance while rotting the foundation beneath it. Machiavelli never excused this behavior, but he exposed it. And it's only by understanding these tactics that we can begin to resist them. When manipulation becomes strategy and illusion replaces truth, the only real defense is internal strength. Machiavelli may have revealed the mechanics of power, but protecting ourselves from its darker forms requires something more personal: awareness, discipline, and reflection. In a world where incompetent leaders weaponize perception, flood our minds with noise, and exploit our deepest fears, the battlefield is no longer just political. It's psychological, and the first line of defense begins within. The first defense is intellectual humility, the rare courage to admit what we don't know. Research shows that intellectually humble people are better at analyzing evidence, questioning assumptions, and resisting manipulation. They don't fall for confidence, masquerading as competence. In fact, intellectual humility functions like a cognitive immune system, helping us filter truth from spectacle and substance from style. It protects us from false certainty by teaching us to value inquiry over ideology and truth over tribalism. Second, we must develop media literacy, the ability to tell the difference between noise and insight. Not all information is equal, and not all voices deserve equal weight. The modern world floods us with content, But wisdom comes from knowing what not to consume. Warren Buffett once said, "Really successful people say no to almost everything." Apply that to your information diet. Say no to clickbait, say no to spectacle, say yes to depth, quality, and ideas that challenge you. Third, and perhaps most importantly, we must embrace philosophical reflection, a practice as old as civilization. The Stoics did it daily. Socrates built his life on it. To reflect is to step back from the whirlwind of influence and ask, what do I believe? What do I value? What am I serving with my time, attention, and loyalty? This is not passive thought. It is active resistance to a world designed to distract and manipulate. It's how we reclaim our autonomy in an age of noise. When institutions fail, when leaders deceive, when truth becomes hard to see, your mind is the last territory you must guard. Awareness is not weakness, it is power. And the more clearly you see, the harder you are to control. That is the beginning of freedom. Not just from others, but from the illusions they sell. If incompetence can rise because of broken systems, then the path forward isn't just about better people, it's about better design. Machiavelli never believed that individuals alone could save a republic. He understood that power, once corrupted, sustains itself unless structures are built to contain it. The question we must ask now is not just who should lead, but how do we build systems that reward the right kinds of leadership? It begins with accountability. Power without feedback is a breeding ground for dysfunction. We must design systems that confront leaders with the truth, systems that measure performance clearly, reward honesty over charisma, and make deception costly. Whether it's corporate boards, government watchdogs, or independent journalism, institutions must be structured to resist charm and demand results. Because when no one is watching, the mask always wins. Second, we need cognitive diversity. Research shows that diverse teams, those with different backgrounds, viewpoints, and ways of thinking, consistently outperform homogeneous ones in decision-making. Why? Because they challenge groupthink, they expose blind spots, and they force complexity to be considered. In leadership and policy, this means including not just experts, but dissenters, not just insiders, but outliers. Systems that listen only to themselves decay from the inside out. Third, we must embed transparency at every level. When power hides behind jargon, secrecy, or spectacle, manipulation thrives. But when decisions are exposed to public scrutiny, when information flows freely and accessibly, deception loses its grip. Transparency is not just about ethics, it's about effectiveness. Sunlight reveals incompetence, and in a well-lit room, the unqualified cannot hide for long. Ultimately, systems must be designed with human flaws in mind. We cannot wish away bias, tribalism, or the appeal of simplicity, but we can build institutions that make it harder for those flaws to dominate. Machiavelli didn't ask us to build utopias. He asked us to build realities strong enough to survive ambition, deception, and power plays. The future belongs not to those who dream of perfect leaders, but to those who build systems that protect the truth, even when the truth is unpopular. That is how competence survives. That is how integrity wins. For centuries, Machiavelli has been misunderstood, branded a cynic, a villain, a heartless strategist who taught tyrants how to win. But that interpretation misses the point. Machiavelli didn't create the darkness, he exposed it. He didn't invent manipulation, he decoded it. And in doing so, he left us with something far more valuable than comfort: clarity. His deeper message wasn't to become the most ruthless, but to stop being naive about how the world works. Because when we finally understand how power is gained, abused, and preserved, only then can we build something better. Throughout The Prince, Machiavelli doesn't tell us how the world should be. He shows us how it actually is. A world where perception often beats truth, where simplicity seduces more than substance, where the intelligent are sidelined and the manipulative rewarded. It's brutal, it's unsettling, and it's real. But within that realism lies a radical opportunity: the power to design systems, behaviors, and communities that don't fall victim to these patterns. His work is not a manual for cruelty. It is a mirror for a society too quick to believe in appearances and too slow to question the machinery behind them. It is not titles that honor men, he wrote, but men that honor titles. In that one line, he reverses the logic of status and reminds us, power should not be revered unless it is earned. Authority means nothing without integrity behind it, and followers should never forget that. The deeper message of Machiavelli is not that we should become predators, but that we should become aware. Aware of how easy it is to be fooled. Aware of how fragile truth is in the hands of spectacle. And aware that if we don't protect intelligence, integrity, and wisdom, those things will be pushed to the margins. He taught us that systems matter more than slogans, that incentives shape behavior more than ideals, and that protecting virtue requires more than wishing for it. It requires structure, courage, and design. If the intelligent are to lead, they must do more than speak. They must understand the battlefield. They must prepare for manipulation. And they must build environments where honesty is not punished, but protected. Understanding Machiavelli doesn't mean surrendering to darkness. It means refusing to be blind to it. And in a world that still rewards illusion over truth, that insight is not just historical, it's urgent. Because real power, the kind that lasts and uplifts, doesn't come from fear or deception. It comes from truth, backed by strategy, and held with integrity. That's the world we must build. One where power is no longer something we fear, but something we can finally trust. In a world where perception often outweighs truth, where overconfidence is mistaken for competence, and where power rewards performance more than substance, we must learn to see clearly. One of the most important lessons from Machiavelli and modern psychology is this: never assume that those in power are the most qualified. Many rise not because they are capable, but because they know how to appear confident, control perception, and exploit human bias towards simplicity. So how do we protect ourselves? First, we must develop intellectual humility, the ability to admit what we don't know and to question what seems too certain. Second, we need media literacy and emotional discipline in a world saturated with noise. Not every loud voice deserves our attention. Third, we must stop equating charisma with character. True leadership often speaks quietly, hesitates thoughtfully, and leads with integrity, not spectacle. Finally, we must demand more from the systems we're part of, from workplaces to politics. Competence should not be the exception, it should be the foundation. And that starts with us, valuing truth over appearances, long-term thinking over quick fixes, and courage over comfort. Machiavelli didn't ask us to become ruthless. He asked us to stop being naive. And in today's world, that might be the most important survival skill of all.